Hey guys, what's going on? So I wanted to make this video as a face cam video because I think the last time I talked about this, I was also doing a face cam video, and what I was talking about is the idea that I felt this was before Gunslinger even came out, so you can backtrace me on this, but it was a straight to the developers video. Those never mean anything, by the way. Those are just my jokey ways of like trying to get people to click on a video. And it was my idea that I don't understand why they don't like money and how they keep pushing out like the next best DPS card, and they should be pushing out support cards, because if they had a support card that everybody wants, that everybody needs, then that would make them infinite money, because you wouldn't just be getting the person that wants the newest best thing, but you would be getting everybody, because everybody needs support cards. And if you came out with like a Scrapper or a Dryad, if Scrapper and Dryad were never in the game, and you brought that out as an event unit, do you know how insane that would be? Or a Knight statue? Oh, your units get attack speed and crit chance. And when you get to 15, it also does defense reduction. Do you know how insane that would be if those were the support cards? I bet they're kicking themselves for not doing that. But, you know, after that, they came out with Gunslinger. Now they came out with Kobold. And those are becoming the newest, like, best support cards. I expect a Dryad Scrapper replacement at some point. Just a super Dryad or a super Scrapper. It does both things. And it doesn't work with either Dryad or Scrapper. It's a card that, I don't know, levels up, and then you get an equivalent copy. So like when it levels up, and you can level up something of the same level. So you can like make it a level 1, and then you can level up all your things. And then when you make it a level 2, you can level up all your things, and then make it a level 3, and then level up all your things. And then, yeah, that's gonna be it. I just gave you Super Scrapper. Super Scrapper Dryad, that's gonna be the thing. And then like the mana ability is it levels down. It levels down 1 level, so you can like re-level it up, so it makes Zeus even better than Zeus already is. So here is my idea. When in that same video, I talked about the idea that if they wanted to come out with a support card, that they should come out with something that is they could come out with green fuck you, you know, like Forest Faction fuck you, and they just introduce it as a, you know, like as a thing, and it does attack reduction, and it's basically a specific card that you put in your deck that says, you know, fuck you, Forest Faction, you know, in the case that, you know, Forest Faction has the dominant card, Phoenix, right? If in your meta, you just keep seeing Phoenix after Phoenix after Phoenix, right? And you just keep playing against that, you put Forest Faction fuck you into your deck, and then you have a chance now with whatever deck you're running against Forest Faction. Now I came up with this idea specifically because a lot of people's fix for this game is buffs and debuffs, or buffs and nerfs. So for, you know, Phoenix is the best card right now. So so the people's answer would be nerf Phoenix, right? Nerf Phoenix to the ground. It's too good, right? So let's say they nerf Phoenix to the ground to where it does as much damage as a Boreas. Okay. Genie is now the best. Oh, nerf Genie. Genie's too good. So then, okay, they nerf Genie to where, they take away all of its talents, and now it's a Corsair, right? Bard is now the best. Nerf Bard. Bard is too good. It doesn't do anything. Nerfs and buffs do fuck all for this game. They don't do anything. They make you feel better as a player, because now you can think, oh, is my Demon Hunter just slightly better now? Is my Corsair just slightly better now because they nerfed Phoenix, because they nerfed Scrapper, and they nerfed Genie, and they nerf Fortuna, and they nerf Gunslinger, all the cards in that deck. Is my Corsair better than that card now? Now that it's nerfed? Now that everybody nerfed it? Now that they answered all my prayers and they nerfed every aspect of that deck? Is my Corsair deck better now? No, it's not. Because Genie is still good, and everybody still runs Genie. Despite what people try to tell me, everybody still runs Genie, and it's still good. Is it better than Phoenix? No, but it's number 2. maybe. Or maybe it's number 3 to Bard. Maybe it's number 4 to Blade Dance. I don't know. Like, it's still very high up there. And they nerfed every aspect of that deck and it did nothing, right? And therein lies my problem with nerfing and buffing cards, and that's what everybody's like solution to fixing the game is. The problem with this game, as I've stated many times before, is the idea that if this game stopped right now, if they made no update, if they made nothing, no changes to anything, if they didn't do anything for this game, if the developers were just like, bye, we're moving on to another game, and this game stayed in the state that it currently is forever, Phoenix, Stasis, Kobold, Scrapper. Phoenix, Stasis, Kobold, Scrapper, and another card. I think they're running Harley Quinn now. That's the deck. That's the deck that everybody would run, and you would just play infinite mirror matches when you eventually moved up your account to have all of that in Reincarnation 3, and you would just play the same people. You would just be playing mirror matches all day. That would be the game, and that's the game. And the only way they know how to change the game, to change the meta, is by doing nerfs and buffs, which, like I just said, doesn't do anything. It just changes the top card based on how the developers want to change the top card. They could nerf Phoenix. They could do it. They could be like, oh, Phoenix does 1 damage now. Base damage, 1 damage. They could do that. It's totally within their power. They could do that. And then all of a sudden, Bard is the best card. Or Genie is the best card. And it doesn't do anything. And it just makes it so that they can determine what they want to be the best and what they don't want to be the best. Right? Corsair. Corsair percentage damage. They're like, oh, we don't want that. It doesn't have percentage damage anymore. That's how easy it is. They can just do that at will. If they had okay, so here is my fix. This is my fix. Because I've been thinking about this for a while, and I came up with this idea because of Clock. Clock and Toxic decks. The reason why Clock and all of the Toxic cards, Shaman at its peak, Witch at its peak, Frost at its peak, Robot at its peak, Minotaur at its peak, Necromancer, that whole deck, the Harley Quinn deck, right? That entire Toxic deck. The reason why it was overly good was because it was generically good against everything. It didn't matter what your deck was, it could just beat you before wave 5. In the same way that Phoenix, Stasis, Kobold doesn't care what you have as long as you don't have this and it beats you. But they are okay with that because in order to get a Phoenix and a Kobold, you have to spend money. Every ounce of the Toxic deck is basically free to play. Actually, it's super free to play now because now you can get Sea Dog and you can get Minotaur and you can get Robot, right? And then the rest of the deck has been in the game forever. Shaman, Witch, Frost, it's been in the game forever. So there's no way to monetize a Toxic deck other than Necromancer. If they want to make DPS the best thing so that they can always rotate in the newest best DPS card, that's the reason why they needed to nerf Toxic. It wasn't for you. It wasn't for the community. It was because it was a generically good deck against everything. The reason why they nerfed Clock was for the exact same reason. It's generically good against everything. Here's my fix. And here's the thing that would fix everything. And fix the nerfing and buffing problem. You want your newest best unit to be great? This is what you do. Rework Clock so that it is my jokey thing is I want it to be called the Clock of Community, because it's toxic against everything, and it says it just hates everything. It's the Rush Royale community. It just says, I hate everything, right? Now, to not make this overpowered, before the game starts, you have to set it to a specific faction. And it only works against that faction. So prior to the game even starting, when you go into and make your deck, right, you have to set it to a faction, and it's on like a wheel or whatever, right? You click on it and you select Forest faction, right? The clock does exactly, it does what it used to do before, where the more you have on the field, the stronger the effect. The higher tier they go up, the stronger the effect. And it's regulated based on those two factors. There's no talent tree. You get a talent at 9, a talent at 11, a talent at 13, and a talent at 15. And these are all single individual talents. You cannot change them. At base, what it does is it reduces crit damage, and on activation, because it has no mana activation, it just decreases attack speed for a specific amount of time. These are all numbers that you'd have to play with. So at base, it's crit damage. It's reduction to crit damage, and then reduction to attack speed, and that's based on level, and that's based on, you can base this on time. You can, like, as it levels up, it gets like plus 1 second of extra time, or plus 2 seconds, however you want to like judge that. At level 9, it now affects crit chance. At level 11, it now affects attack damage. At level 13, it affects attack speed. At level 15, like double bonuses. It gets double bonuses to everything. The Clock of Community does literally nothing. It does nothing on the field. It's like a clock of power. It benefits you in no way, shape, or form. It is a card that you have to specifically slot in, taking out a support card in order to theoretically hose a specific faction deck. The pure idea of the threat of this is what I like. Because if you're running a Phoenix Stasis Kobold deck, right? Do you take out one of your units? Do you take out a Harlequin in order to not get as many Kobold stacks? You can't take out the Scrapper. I mean, I guess you could take out the Scrapper if you're running Zeus, right? Do you take out the Stasis so that you can specifically hose another Phoenix deck? But what if you go up against a Bard deck instead, and you've set it to Forest faction? Well, then it's a dead card in your deck now, and every single time you pull Clock of Community, every single time you're using your summon-in cost, and you're getting a Clock of Community, right? Now it's just a dead card, and now you're just wasting money. The simple idea of introducing this kind of card makes everybody build their deck or build their deck differently. Because if everybody knows that Phoenix is the best card right now, and you decide to run Forest faction, you know, community, the Clock of Community, and then everybody starts like putting in Clock of Community into their deck and just figuring out a spot, and they all set it to Forest faction, what does that do to the meta? Well, then the new meta could become Genie, right? And then all of a sudden you don't want to play the best card. You want to play a different card because everybody's running this on Forest faction just in case. So then that person who could be playing Phoenix switches to a Genie deck. Right? And then all of a sudden these other people with a Clock of Community card set to Forest faction, now that's a dead card, and now they could potentially die to a Genie deck. If a Forest faction, if a Phoenix player is playing Clock of Community against a Genie deck, they now have a dead card. The Genie deck could have a completely just regular Genie-based Sultan deck, and then all of a sudden, they can't add the space for a Clock of Community card, and so they just run a fully powered Genie deck, and they could beat the Phoenix deck. I feel like just having this in the game would change the way people build decks. And it's this weird kind of, I don't know if you've ever seen The Princess Bride, but it's like, it feels like this. And this is what I've always wanted in the game. I've always wanted there to be a rock, paper, scissors. And they're not gonna do that. There's not gonna be, just the way that the game is built, I suppose there can't be a rock, paper, scissors. But what you can do is have a support card that literally doesn't do anything, but it can specifically target the meta, or whatever you think the meta is. And it can specifically attempt to completely destroy like a Phoenix deck, or a Blade Dancer deck. It would do it to a Blade Dancer deck. It would do it to a Spirit Master deck. Everything in that faction. If there's light faction week and it's evolution, and every single time you kill a boss, your 3 light faction units get like leveled up 3 times. Well, obviously you're probably going to want to play Clock of Community and set it to light faction. But what if, because they know that you're going to set it to light faction, they then instead play just a different deck? They don't play Bard. They play Genie. They play Phoenix, right? And then this would be tailored to whatever meta you're currently in. Maybe you're not playing in a Forest faction meta. Maybe you're not playing in a Phoenix meta. Maybe you're playing in a Demon Hunter meta, and then you set it to Magic Council. I feel like just the like back and forth like mind game that you can play with the meta, introducing a card like this, and it would also allow you to refresh Clock of Power. It would also allow you to add talents to Clock of Power, while at the same time making it both overpowered because it does all of these things for a specific faction, but also not overpowered to work with everything. It only works against the specific thing that you put it against. I think that the targeted like hosing, the targeted like fuck you, is very good. And again, it doesn't do anything on your field, and it doesn't work unless you decide to upgrade a large quantity of them, right? You're gonna get a better effect if you have a large quantity of them. Some decks can't even afford the space. Like, how many spaces can a Genie deck afford this card, right? But other decks, like an Inquisitor deck, could. But an Inquisitor deck isn't that strong. So will it even beat a Phoenix? It could, if it was set to Forest faction and you had a Dark Inquisitor and you filled up your board. So it would be like old school, like Dark Inquisitor, right? But what if that person isn't playing Phoenix and they decide to set it to Forest faction Phoenix? All of a sudden that person is playing a Genie. Well, the Genie deck's gonna win, because you chose to use this card, you chose to set it to Forest faction, now it's your fault, right? And you probably will die because it doesn't do anything against a Genie deck, right? Or it doesn't do anything against a Bard deck, right? Unless you set it to that faction beforehand, and you have to guess. I think this fixes a lot of problems. It would fix a lot of the problems that I would have with this game. Because like I said, if this game ended right now and they made no update for the rest of the entire length of time that this game exists, everybody would just be running a Reincarnation 3 Phoenix, a Reincarnation 3 Kobold, a Harley Quinn, a Scrapper, and a Gunslinger. That would be every deck. And a Zeus or a Fortuna, who cares? But if this card was introduced, all of a sudden, like, that deck building becomes very different. And you could potentially, if that became the meta, you could change the meta yourself by running the Clock of Community. You could create a deck where you do force, you could run the Dark Inquisitor deck with this. But then if that becomes the meta, you can decide to do a force, what's it called, like Phoenix players could do Light Faction. They could run a Clock of Community and run Light Faction against a Dark Inquisitor player. And they could do Light Faction, because then it would also kill Bard players, right? But then a Phoenix deck could run Force Faction against a person running Light Faction to hose Dark Faction, to hose a Dark Inquisitor. And then all of a sudden the Phoenix deck that ran it with a Force Faction would hose the Phoenix deck. At which point that person could be like, okay, well, I'm going to do a Phoenix deck with Force Faction against a Phoenix deck with Force Faction. And I don't know, like, I just feel like it opens up so much more deck building. And by deck building, I mean like, or maybe I don't mean deck building. It opens up so many more avenues to taking down decks that you can't take down. Just by simply introducing a card like this, knowing that's out there, is kind of like knowing that Toxic is out there. Because you know that Toxic is out there, you sometimes want to run Regeneration on your Treant. You sometimes want to run Mermaid. Maybe you want to run triple Counterspell on all of your equipment, right? If you didn't think that there was any chance of Toxic being a matchup that you could come up against, whether you come up against it or not, very often or not, you have to prepare for it. You have to prepare some amount of cleanse. You know, there's Dark Pudding and King Pudding, and there's Dark Priest, and you know, like there's effect-based monster bosses, right, that you have to prep for. But triple Counterspell can like basically cleanse that. But how do you deal with Toxic? That's how a Mermaid will come in. And then you won't just auto lose those battles. And that's just the simple idea that Toxic as a deck exists. Somebody could Shaman you and Witch you and Robot you and Minotaur you, right? Just the idea that it exists makes you deck build differently. And I feel like if you introduce Clock of Community into the game as a potential, you could theoretically, you could change up the meta without having to change up the meta with needless buffs and debuffs. The game could end right now, and if Clock of Community was in the game, it would be fine.